Okay, welcome back. In this lecture, we will now be creating our example blueprint so we can see some of what will be happening in the game. So if we first will begin by creating a new folder, and this folder will be called Blueprints. And then inside of the blueprint folder, we will create a blueprint class. So right click and create blueprint class. And as I did last time, we want the actor class so that we can place something in the world. And I'm just going to call this BP, so lowercase bp for blueprint, and just call this example, so blueprint example. And then if we double click this like I did in the previous lecture, just drag this up, and we now have our first blueprint. So this technically doesn't need to look like anything, but I will just add a static mesh again. I'm going to add one other thing as well. So what we normally get here, we have a default scene root for any blueprint we create normally. And it gives this spherical representation. I'm not a huge fan of that. So to get rid of this, if we add another component called scene, so find the scene component and click on that. And then with this selected, drag it up and onto the default scene root, and it will get rid of that. So this now means that the scene is the parent object in this blueprint class. And then with the static mesh, just so we've got something to look at. So I'm going to use the coin this time, as I used the pickup previously. So there we go, we now have a coin. So this just gives us something to look at. So that is how we add what is called components. So blueprints are normally made up of a number of components. And you can add pretty much any number of components, and there's a big selection of things which are available to choose from. But as with everything else, what I'm going to do is I will start describing these and explaining what they are as and when we need them. Because you can see from this list, it would be pointless me trying to explain what all of these are before we need to use them and hope that you remember what they are when we do come back to it. So what we then have down here, we have our event graph. So in the previous lecture, when I was showing you the begin play and the construction script, we can double click on these down here and it takes us to the same place in the event graph over here. So that's what the event graph is. That correlates to that. And then the construction script is actually a function. So we can double click on the construction script, and that's our function here. So you can see that as well by the F, which show that that is a function, and the square thingies here are the event graph. So the next section of our blueprint are the things we're interested in now. So if we go back to the viewport, we have our variables down to the left. We have these anywhere, sorry, just so I don't make that confusing. So we can see our variables in whichever tab we're in. And I'm not going to add any gameplay in this, I just want to get across the concept of what the variables and the functionality of the blueprints will do. So we're going to add a new variable, and we will call this, we'll just call this text. So this will provide some text for us. So what we have here is a Boolean as default. A Boolean is just a yes, no, true, false check essentially. And what we want to do is change this, because this is text, we want to change this to a string. So if we go to the right, we can change the variable type to string. And if we press compile now, you'll see it says down here the default value. We can give this a value as standard, but we can only do that if we press compile first. So this will give us a text box, and we can now give this the text. So if you remember, we have the representation of a coin. So I'm just going to say, I'm a coin. Nice and simple. And we'll use this a bit later on. And then we also want to add a variable, another variable. And I'll just call this count. And this variable type, we will make an integer. So an integer is just a number. It's a single number. So it has to be a whole number. 1, 2, 3 example. If we wanted a number with a point value, we would want to make that a float, and then you could get 1.5, 2.5 and so on. So again, we need to compile this so that we can add a default value, but for this one I'm going to leave this as 0. So next, what we want to do is, if we go, I'm already in the event graph now, if we zoom in, we have 3 different nodes down here. So we have one called event begin play. This will fire as soon as you begin playing. We have one called event begin overlap, which we can delete for now, but just know that if we had something which was going to collide, or like the projectiles and the player, this would be something that we might be interested in then to check if it's hit something. And then we have our event tick. So for anyone who's familiar with programming, this would be like a start function in C#, and this would be an update function in C#. So this will fire once at the beginning, and this will fire normally every frame, so 60 frames per second. So this is firing fairly often. Now what we want to do to show that this blueprint is doing something, I'm going to do something very simple to begin with. What we want to do first of all is get the text value. And there's a few different ways to get a value from over here. So we can right click and we can type the word text, and we're looking for the one which aligns with the color that we have over here, so our pink text. We have two options. We have get text, so that will get the value inside of that text, which at the moment says I'm a coin, or we can set the text. So in code, essentially what we can do is change that to say something else. I want to get the text, so that's one option, and you'll see this as the get, and again I'm going to get text, and I'm going to set it this time, and you get a slightly different node, and that's how you know you're setting the text or setting a variable. So I'm going to delete those. Another way you can get them in is you can click and drag and then let go, and you get the option to either get or set the variable. And the final option is you can click it whilst holding Control to get the variable, or click and drag it whilst holding Alt to set the variable. That's the way I'll be doing it because it's faster, and it's become muscle memory. So if you see me just dragging something from the side, just try and remember which one I've used. Again, Control is get, Alt is set. So that's the way I'll be doing it. So we're going to get the text. And also I should have said as well, these colors correspond to the variable type. So it's not something we can change, but it does allow you to quickly see what type of variable it is when you've been using this for long enough. I know without looking now that booleans are red, floats are turquoisey green color, ints are a standard green, which actually lets me know that that is a float and I want that to be an integer. References are light blue and things like that, so you quite quickly become accustomed to what the different colors are, so that's really handy. Okay, so I'm just going to do something really simple now to finish off this blueprint so that we've got something happening. So now we have our text variable. We're going to drag off of the event tick and we're going to call something called print. This is just print string, and this is just going to print the string, remember that's the variable type of this, to the screen. So you plug the text variable into the string variable so that we now fill that with the words that we've given it. And if we drop this down, this allows us to just double check that we will be printing this to the screen. We'll also be printing it to the log, which comes down here, but we don't need to worry too much about that right now. And this will last for 2 seconds, and it will be called every frame, so it's going to be called a lot. So essentially this means that we should expect to see the words I'm a coin stay on the screen pretty much forever. So if we drag this into the world, we won't be able to see the coin, but we will be able to see the text to the left hand side, so you can now see I'm a coin printed over and over, so we know that something's happening and we know we're doing the right thing. So the other thing we can do is we can get the counter, and we can do the same thing with this. So if we get count, drag this in, and as soon as we've printed the string, I'm going to print the count. So we're going to print again, print string, and we're going to do something slightly different here. So we're going to drag off of here, and we're going to say plus, so the mathematical plus sign, and we're going to look for the integer plus integer. And we're just going to add 1 to whatever the current count is every frame. So the number's going to go up really quickly. And then from here, we will drag this into the string value again. Now you can see what's happening here is it's saying convert integer to string. So this is expecting a pink variable to be plugged in, and we're plugging in a green variable. So what Unreal is saying is that you're kind of trying to do something that I know what to do, but it's wrong. Do you want me to do it? Essentially. So it knows what we're aiming for, but it also knows we haven't taken the correct steps to get there, so it's converting it for us with this, which is really handy again, nice and quick and convenient. In code, what you would have needed to have done would be to have converted the integer value to a string value before you're allowed to do that. So this is one of the things where blueprinting can just be very, very quick to prototype things and really handy. So we're going to print this, and I'm going to make this a different color so it stands out. So we'll make this green. Just make sure it's a viewable green, yep. And then if we compile that, go back over, and it's now adding, oh okay, that's obvious, yep. So it's now just printing out the value 1. The reason being is that we're not actually resetting the count. So I want this to keep count of itself as well. So if we go up here and set count to be the value of that, and then we're going to plug the node from the set string in there and in there, and if we alt click, remember to remove this and then make it print the value afterwards. So what this is now doing is it's guessing what count currently is, it's adding 1 to it, it's then setting that. So when this is 0, it will add 1 to 0 and make it 1, and then it will make this 1, and then it will print this. And then because this is then being called the very next frame, this will be 1 still. So it's getting this as 1, it's adding 1 to it, which will be 2, it's making itself 2, and then it's printing 2. So we should now see that number going up nice and quickly. There we go. So as I said, happening every frame, so it's happening really fast. But we can see that this is some really simple blueprint functionality in play. And this is how we're going to be manipulating and altering the variables during play. So hopefully that has all made sense. We're going to keep this example for the next lecture, which will be the debugging. And the reason I've set this numerical checkup is so that what I've just verbally described there, we're going to debug through that to get a better idea of how this is being called and how it's working. So I'll leave that there for now, and I will see you in the next lecture.